The sky had been dark since afternoon, but I didn't expect the storm to turn this cruel. I sat quietly in the passenger seat, my hands folded in my lap, watching the raindrops race each other down the windshield. The car smelled familiar, his cologne, the same one I used to like. That smell now felt heavy, suffocating. "You're not saying anything," he said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the road. "What do you want me to say?" I replied softly. He scoffed. "That's the problem. You're always like this, silent, dramatic." My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to explain how tired I was of being misunderstood. But I stayed quiet. Silence was safer. Silence didn't start fights. The road stretched endlessly ahead of us, empty and wet. Streetlights became fewer, and soon there were none at all, just darkness and rain. "Why are we coming this way?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. Instead, he slowed the car and pulled over near a deserted patch of road. My heart began to pound. "What are you doing?" I whispered. He turned to me, his face cold. "This is it." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "He means, get out." His words were sharp, final. "I'm done." The rain grew louder, as if the sky itself was reacting to his cruelty. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice breaking. "It's raining. There's nothing here." He opened my door. Cold air rushed in. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Tears filled my eyes. "After everything, you're leaving me like this." He didn't respond. I stepped out slowly, my legs trembling. He threw my bag onto the ground, slammed the door shut, and drove away, his car disappearing into the storm like I had never mattered at all. I stood there, alone. The rain soaked me within seconds. My heart felt heavier than my body. I hugged my arms around myself, trying to stay warm, trying not to fall apart. This can't be real, I thought. He wouldn't do this to me. But he already had. And that lonely road, under a merciless sky, became the place where my old life ended and something I couldn't yet imagine began. I don't know how long I stood there after he left. Time lost its meaning on that dark road. The rain soaked through my clothes, clinging to my skin like a reminder that I was truly alone. My fingers felt numb, my teeth chattered, but the cold inside my chest was far worse than the cold in the air. I picked up my bag from the muddy ground and hugged it tightly, as if it could protect me. My phone screen was black, dead. No calls, no messages, no one to save me. I looked down the road in both directions. Nothing. No cars, no lights, no sound except the rain and my shaky breathing. Fear slowly crawled into my heart. What if no one comes? What if something happens to me here? I tried to walk, thinking maybe I could find a house or a bus stop, but after just a few steps, my legs felt weak. The road was slippery, my shoes heady with water. Every shadow looked dangerous. Every sound made my heart jump. Memories started flooding my mind. Memories of how I trusted him. He used to promise me, "I'll never leave you." He used to say, "You're safe with me." I let out a bitter laugh that quickly turned into sobbing. Safe? I was standing on a deserted road in a storm, abandoned like I meant nothing. I sank down near the edge of the road, pulling my knees to my chest. The rain fell harder now, as if the sky was crying with me. "I didn't deserve this," I whispered to no one. My mind went to dark places. I imagined spending the whole night there, or worse, being found too late. Fear wrapped around me, tightening with every passing minute. Then, faintly, I heard something. An engine. I lifted my head, my heart racing. Through the rain and darkness, two headlights appeared far away. For a moment, hope sparked inside me, only to be quickly replaced by doubt. What if they don't stop? What if they're not safe? The car passed by. My heart sank. But suddenly, Red brake lights glowed ahead. The car slowed down. I stood up quickly, wiping rain from my eyes, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. The vehicle turned around and slowly approached me. As it came closer, I realized it wasn't an ordinary car. It was a large, expensive-looking SUV, clean, powerful, completely out of place on this lonely road. It stopped a short distance away. For a few seconds, nothing happened. I held my breath. The driver's window rolled down, and that moment, standing there, soaked, shaking, and broken, felt like the final test of my faith. Would this be help or just another disappointment? The rain didn't slow down. If anything, it felt angrier now, heavier, louder, as if the sky was testing how much more I could endure. The black SUV stood still in front of me, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I raised one trembling hand, not to wave, but to shield my eyes. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure the driver could hear it. The window rolled down slowly. "Are you okay?" The voice was calm, steady, nothing like the harsh tone I had heard just minutes earlier from the man who abandoned me. I tried to answer, but my throat tightened. I nodded instead, though my body was shaking uncontrollably. The driver turned on the interior light. I could now see him clearly, a man in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. His face carried lines of age, but his eyes were gentle, concerned. "You shouldn't be standing here in this weather," he said. "Are you alone?" I hesitated. Years of being told not to trust anyone screamed inside my head, but the truth slipped out anyway, broken and soft. He left me." The man's expression changed, not to anger, not to shock, but to something warmer, understanding. "I see," he said quietly. He opened the door and stepped out, holding a large umbrella. Rain hit the top of it loudly as he walked toward me. "Please," he said, offering it to me, "get inside the car. You'll catch a cold." I stood frozen. My mind was screaming questions. What if he's not safe? What if this is another mistake? But my body was exhausted. My heart had no strength left to argue. I took a small step forward, then another. As soon as I sat inside the SUV, warmth surrounded me. The heater was on. Soft music played quietly in the background. My wet clothes stuck to my skin, but for the first time since being abandoned, I felt protected. The man closed the door gently and returned to the driver's seat. "I'm sorry," I whispered suddenly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." He looked at me with surprise. "You're not trouble," he said firmly. "No one deserves to be left like that." Those words hit me harder than anything else that night. He handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized tears were streaming down my face. "My name is Ahmed," he said. "What's yours?" I told him. He nodded slowly. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" I shook my head. "My phone's dead. I don't have anyone to call." For a moment, he was quiet. Then he said, "Then you'll come with me. There's a town not far from here. We'll figure something out." Something inside me broke free, not in pain, but in relief. As the SUV moved forward, leaving that cursed road behind, I looked out the window. Rain blurred the world outside, but inside the car there was light, warmth, humanity. And for the first time that night, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone leaves. The SUV moved smoothly through the rain, its tires slicing through puddles as if they were nothing. Inside, the warmth slowly crept back into my frozen body. My hands still trembled, but at least they no longer felt numb. Ahmed Saab adjusted the heater slightly. "Tell me if it's too warm," he said kindly. I shook my head. "No, it's fine. Thank you." Silence filled the car for a few moments, not an awkward silence, but a gentle one. the kind that gives you space to breathe. I stared at my reflection in the window, wet hair stuck to my face, eyes red and swollen, looking like someone who had lost everything in a single night. "You look like you've been carrying pain for a long time," Ahmed said softly, without taking his eyes off the road. His words caught me off guard. I swallowed hard. "I didn't plan to say anything," I replied, "but tonight broke me." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes life breaks us in places we thought were safe." Something inside me cracked open. I told him how it had started, how love slowly turned into control, how every argument somehow became my fault, how I stopped speaking up because silence felt easier than being blamed, and finally how he left me on that road as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience. Ahmed listened. He didn't interrupt, he just listened, and that alone felt like healing. "You know," he said after a while, "people who abandoned others in their worst moments are often running from their own weaknesses." I looked at him. "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because you cared," he replied gently, "and caring is never a weakness." His words settled deep in my heart. We passed a small sign indicating a town nearby. Lights began to appear in the distance. Shops, homes, signs of life. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to see that until now. "My daughter," Ahmed said, suddenly, his voice heavier now, "used to look at me the same way you're looking right now. Lost, hurt." I turned toward him. "She trusted the wrong person, too. One night, years ago, she called me crying. I found her sitting at a bus stop in the rain. That night, I promised myself, if I ever see someone in pain like that again, I will not turn away." Tears filled my eyes once more, not from sadness this time, but from gratitude. "So you stopping tonight," I whispered, "wasn't an accident. It was a choice." The SUV slowed as we entered the town. Streets were wet but alive. A small hotel glowed warmly ahead. "I'll make sure you're safe tonight," Ahmed said. "Tomorrow you can decide your next step with a clear mind." As the car came to a stop, I realized something powerful. I had been abandoned by someone who claimed to love me, but rescued by a stranger who owed me nothing. And maybe, just maybe, this stormy night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my strength. The SUV came to a gentle stop in front of the small roadside hotel. Warm yellow lights glowed from inside, reflecting on the wet pavement. For a moment, I just sat there, staring, almost afraid that if I moved, this feeling of safety would disappear. Ahmed stepped out first, opening my door and holding the umbrella above me. The rain had finally begun to slow, but my heart was still heavy with everything that had happened. "Take your time," he said softly. "You're safe now." Inside the hotel, the air was warm and smelled faintly of tea and clean linen. The receptionist looked up, surprised to see us so late. Ahmed spoke calmly, confidently, arranging a room for me as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I stood quietly beside him, feeling small but no longer invisible. When the key was placed on the counter, Ahmed turned to me. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow will be easier." I hesitated. I don't know how to thank you." He smiled kindly. "Just promise me you won't think you deserved what happened to you." That promise felt heavier than any words of gratitude. Upstairs, in the quiet of the room, I finally let myself collapse onto the bed. My wet clothes were replaced with warm blankets. The silence felt strange but comforting. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, my mind slowed down. I replayed the night in my head, the cruel words, the rain, the loneliness, and then the headlights, the calm voice, the warmth. 2 people, 2 choices. One abandoned me, one saved me. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I stared at the ceiling. Why did I stay so long with someone who could leave me like that? Why did it take being abandoned to realize my own worth? A soft knock on the door startled me. Ahmed's voice came through gently. I asked them to bring you some soup. You should eat something. I opened the door slightly. He stood there with a small tray, careful not to step inside, respecting my space. Thank you, I whispered. As I ate slowly, warmth spread through my body, not just from the food, but from the care behind it. Every small gesture felt like a stitch, slowly repairing something broken inside me. Later, as I lay under the blankets, listening to the faint sound of rain outside, a thought came to me. Maybe this night wasn't meant to destroy me. Maybe it was meant to stop me from destroying myself by staying where I was never valued. I closed my eyes for the first time that night without fear, and in the quiet darkness, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The morning sun pierced gently through the thin curtains of the hotel room. I woke up feeling the warmth on my face, a stark contrast to the cold, rainy night that had felt endless. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the memories of last night rushed back. The betrayal, the storm, the fear. And finally, the SUV, Ahmed Saab, and his kindness. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket closer around me. The world outside looked peaceful now, the rain having washed away the remnants of the storm. It was almost surreal, how different everything seemed in the light of day. There was a knock on the door. Breakfast, a hotel staff member said, leaving a tray quietly. I watched her leave and my mind wandered back to Ahmed Saab. I wondered where he was now, if he had gone, or if he would check on me one more time. Minutes later, there was another knock, this time followed by his calm voice. "Good morning," he said, stepping in with a reassuring smile. "Sleep well?" I nodded, my throat tight with gratitude and emotion. I couldn't even find words to express how much last night had changed me. Ahmed placed a small envelope on the table. "Here," he said. "This is a little help to get you back on your feet. Nothing fancy, just enough to start your day with some confidence." I stared at it, overwhelmed. I I don't know what to say. You didn't have to do this. He shook his head. I did, because everyone deserves a chance to rise after falling, and you deserve to feel safe and valued. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of hope, of finally being seen after being abandoned. We shared a quiet moment, no unnecessary words, just understanding. For the first time in a long time, I realized something important. I could survive heartbreak. I could rebuild, and I didn't have to do it alone, though sometimes a stranger's kindness could remind you of your own strength. After breakfast, Ahmed insisted on driving me to the bus station. I hugged him before leaving, feeling the weight of last night's storm finally lift from my shoulders. "You've got this," he said softly. "Remember, the people who leave you don't define your worth. The ones who choose to stay, even strangers, they remind you of it." As I boarded the bus, I looked out the window. The town was slowly waking up, birds chirping, streets alive with movement. The world was moving forward, and now so was I. I knew this night would stay with me forever, not because of the pain, but because of the lesson that in the darkest storms there is still light, and sometimes that light comes from the most unexpected places. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning again. The bus ride felt strangely peaceful. The rhythmic hum of the tires against the wet road was almost meditative. I gazed out the window, watching the world blur past, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel panic or fear. I felt alive. Last night replayed in my mind. Every moment, every small act of kindness. Ahmed Sahab's calm voice, the warmth of the SUV, the gentle way he listened. Those moments had done something incredible. They reminded me that even after being abandoned, there was still goodness in the world. That night had rekindled a spark inside me, a spark that had almost been extinguished. I realized I had spent so long letting someone else define my worth, letting their actions or their absence control my emotions. But now I understood. My life didn't belong to them. My happiness didn't depend on someone who could leave so easily. By the time I reached my city, the sun had fully risen. Golden light spilled across streets and rooftops, illuminating everything in a new way. It felt symbolic, like the world was offering me a fresh start. I didn't have a clear plan yet, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't allow myself to return to the same patterns. I wouldn't let fear or heartbreak define me. That night had taught me something precious. Strength often comes from the most unexpected trials, and kindness, sometimes from strangers, can heal wounds we thought would never mend. I walked through the bustling streets, feeling small yet powerful. Each step was a promise to myself to live fully, to trust cautiously but not close my heart completely, and to never forget my own value. For weeks, I took small steps, healing, rebuilding, and slowly rediscovering joy in simple things, laughter with friends, quiet walks in the park, even a warm cup of tea on a rainy morning. And through it all, Ahmed's words echoed in my mind. The ones who leave don't define your worth. The ones who choose to stay remind you of it. I never saw Ahmed again, and I didn't need to. His presence had been a turning point, a gentle reminder that the world still held compassion, and sometimes that's all you need to find your way back to yourself. Months later, I looked in the mirror and smiled, not just at my reflection, but at the journey I had survived. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, but it had transformed into strength, empathy, and hope. Life wasn't perfect, it never is, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like mine. And maybe that's the true meaning of survival, to walk away from storms, both literal and emotional, and step into a world where you can finally breathe, heal, and begin again. Weeks had turned into months since that stormy night. Life had slowly begun to reshape itself around me. Every day felt like a small victory. Waking up without panic, laughing without guilt, making decisions for myself instead of others. And yet, the memory of being abandoned still lingered, like a shadow that reminded me how far I had come. One rainy afternoon, I found myself walking past a cafe I used to frequent. The memories of the past came rushing. Arguments, silences, and that final night. My chest tightened. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was clarity. I realized I no longer needed his approval or presence to define who I was. I stopped in front of the cafe, watching the rain streaking down the windows. I whispered to myself, I survived. I'm still standing. And then it happened. An unexpected moment of gratitude that filled my heart. I thought of Ahmed Saab, how a stranger with no obligation had reminded me of humanity and kindness, how he had shown me that even when people abandon you, life can still present those who truly care. I realized that my journey wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about awakening, about learning that pain can teach resilience, and that love doesn't always come from who you expect. Sometimes it comes from the unexpected, from strangers, or from the quiet strength you discover inside yourself. That evening, I returned to my small apartment, feeling a strange mix of peace and strength. I lit a candle, sat by the window, and watched the rain fall. But this time, I didn't feel small or broken. I felt alive, whole. A soft smile formed on my face. I whispered, almost to the universe itself, thank you for this second chance, for the storm, for the light after it. And in that moment, I knew something important. Life is unpredictable. People will come and go. Some will leave you in the pouring rain. But if you survive, if you keep walking forward, there will always be someone or something that restores your faith. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The past no longer chained me. The storm had passed, and with each sunrise I found courage, hope, and a love for life that no one could ever take away. For the first time in a long while, I looked ahead with a heart that was unafraid, eyes that were open, and a soul that was finally free. Because the night that abandoned me had also given me something far greater, the knowledge that I could survive, that I could heal, and that I could rise, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the world might bring next. Days turned into weeks after that night, yet the memory of the storm, the rain, and the SUV stayed with me, not as pain, but as a turning point. Every time I thought about it, I remembered the cold fear I had felt when he left me on that lonely road, the way my heart had almost stopped, the way the rain had soaked me to the bone, the hopelessness that had wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. And then I remembered Ahmed Saad, the stranger who had stopped, the warmth in the car, the calm in his voice, the simple acts of kindness that had made me feel human again. His presence reminded me that even in a world where people abandon you, there are those who can restore your faith. I realized that life is full of contrasts. Darkness exists, yes, but so does light. Pain exists, but so does healing. And the moments of kindness, though they may come from unexpected places, are what give life its meaning. I began to look at my life differently. I remembered the time I had spent trying to please someone who didn't care about my feelings, who had left me in a storm without a second thought. I realized I had spent too long measuring my worth by someone else's actions. That night had taught me something crucial. My worth is not defined by those who leave. It is defined by how I survive, how I heal, and how I continue to love myself. In the weeks that followed, I took small steps to rebuild my life. I started waking up early, drinking hot tea while watching the sunrise, and taking long walks through quiet streets. I began journaling, pouring every thought, every fear, and every hope onto paper. I discovered that writing could release the pain I had carried for months, allowing me to see my own resilience reflected back at me. There were moments of doubt, of course, nights when the memories came back, the fear, the betrayal, the cold road. Some nights I cried alone, allowing the grief to flow freely. But gradually, each tear felt lighter, as if it were washing away the heaviness I had carried in my heart. I also reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. Conversations that had once felt awkward now flowed naturally. I realized how isolation had amplified my pain, and how human connection, small acts of laughter, shared meals, and understanding could restore a sense of belonging. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the rain drizzle softly outside. It was nothing like the storm that had abandoned me before. This rain felt gentle, cleansing. I whispered to myself, I survived. I am still here. I am stronger than I thought. I began to reflect on the lessons I had learned. The first was resilience. Pain had taught me that I could endure far more than I had imagined. The second was kindness. Ahmed's unexpected help reminded me that even a stranger could change your life if they acted with compassion. And the third was self-worth. I finally understood that I am deserving of love, care, and respect, no matter who leaves me behind. With each passing day, I felt the shadows of that stormy night fade. I smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and allowed myself to dream again. I even started imagining a future where I would be happy on my own terms, not dependent on anyone else's approval or affection. I also began to forgive, not for those who had abandoned me, but for myself, for staying too long in situations that drained me, for letting fear control my choices, for forgetting my own value. Forgiveness became my tool for healing. It didn't erase the past, but it allowed me to move forward without carrying anger or bitterness. And slowly, life began to feel brighter. Each sunrise was a reminder that new beginnings were possible. Each small act of kindness I encountered reminded me that humanity still existed. And each choice I made to prioritize myself reaffirmed the lesson that I could survive anything, even abandonment, betrayal, and storms that seemed impossible to endure. That reflection, that slow rebuilding, that self-discovery, it became my purpose. I realized that my story wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about awakening, about finding strength where I thought there was none, about learning to trust again, not blindly, but wisely, about discovering that even in the darkest moments, there can be light. As I watched the rain taper off and the city lights shimmer in puddles below, I whispered a silent gratitude for that stormy night, not because of the pain it brought, but because it had led me here, to self-awareness, to healing, and to a strength I never knew I possessed. And in that quiet moment, I understood the truth. Life is unpredictable. Storms will come and people may leave, but you always have the power to rise, to heal, and to find your own light. I smiled, feeling the warmth spread through me. I was no longer the scared, abandoned girl on a rainy road. I was someone who had survived, someone who had grown, someone who was ready for whatever the future held. The days after my reflections became a turning point were quiet but transformative. Each morning I woke with a small sense of purpose. The memories of that stormy night, the fear and the betrayal no longer haunted me. They guided me. I began to live intentionally, focusing on things that nourished my heart and mind. I started by creating a routine, mornings for reflection, afternoons for work and growth, and evenings for relaxation and gratitude. Simple as it seemed, these small choices began to rebuild my life from the ground up. I felt the heavy burden of fear lift, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known existed. One day, I walked through a familiar park, the sunlight glinting off the leaves, and noticed children playing freely, couples walking hand in hand, and elderly people feeding birds. Everything seemed ordinary, yet everything felt extraordinary to me. I smiled genuinely, feeling a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in months. I also reconnected with people I had unintentionally pushed away in my pain. Conversations with friends became deeper, more meaningful. Laughter returned to my days, and I realized how isolation had amplified my past heartbreak. The love and support I had been ignoring were still there, waiting for me to embrace them. The lessons from that night and Ahmed Saab's kindness continued to resonate. I learned that strength is not measured by how much you endure silently, but by how you choose to rise after being broken. I understood that life will have storms, that some people will leave, and that unexpected kindness has the power to heal wounds you thought would never mend. Months passed. I found myself exploring new passions, small adventures, and moments that reminded me of my resilience. I even volunteered at a local shelter occasionally, sharing a little kindness with those who needed it, just as Ahmed had shared it with me. It felt fulfilling, as if by helping others, I was healing myself even further. Then came a quiet evening, the kind of evening that feels like the world is holding its breath. I sat by the window, rain gently tapping against the glass, a soft, soothing drizzle this time, and I reflected. The person I had been, standing alone in the storm, was gone. The fear, the despair, the feeling of worthlessness, they belonged to the past. I had survived, and in surviving, I had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I whispered softly to myself, I am enough. I am worthy. I am free. For the first time, I felt completely in control of my life, not because I could control everything that happened, but because I had learned to control how I responded. I realized that happiness was not something to be sought externally, it was something I could cultivate from within. Life didn't promise perfection. There would still be challenges, storms, and moments of doubt, but I no longer feared them. I had learned that the storms pass, that kindness exists even in unexpected places, and that my own heart could be my strongest ally. That night, as I closed my eyes, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for surviving, but for everything I had learned along the way. Every tear, every fear, every lonely moment had shaped me into someone stronger, someone capable of love, joy, and hope. I slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow and every day after was mine to live fully, intentionally, and fearlessly. And in that knowledge, I discovered the most profound truth of all. Life is not about avoiding storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain, to rise after being abandoned, and to embrace every moment with courage, gratitude, and a heart open to hope. The night that had once threatened to break me became the night that taught me to soar. I woke the next morning with a heart unburdened, a spirit renewed, and eyes wide open to the endless possibilities of life. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely free. The morning air was cool and crisp as I stepped outside, feeling sunlight spilled gently across my face. The world seemed alive in a way it hadn't felt before. Birds chirped, people hurried along the streets, and somewhere, distant laughter floated in the breeze. I breathed deeply, savoring it all. For the first time, I didn't feel rushed or anxious. I simply existed, and it felt incredible. I walked slowly through the neighborhood, noticing small details that I had once overlooked. The way leaves shimmered after a rainfall, the warmth of a stranger's smile as they passed, the delicate scent of flowers in a nearby garden. Each small detail reminded me that life had beauty, even in the quiet moments, and that I could experience it fully now that my heart was healing. As I moved through the streets, I reflected on the journey I had been through. The abandonment, the cold rain, the fear that had wrapped around me like chains, it all felt distant, yet it remained a part of who I had become. I realized that those experiences, though painful, had shaped a new strength inside me, a strength not born from avoiding pain, but from surviving it. I remembered the night I had stood on that lonely road, shivering and hopeless, and the sudden kindness of a stranger who had reminded me that compassion exists in the world. That memory no longer brought tears of despair. It brought warmth, a quiet reassurance that even in the darkest nights, hope could find its way. For the first time, I began to truly understand the power of resilience. Life would throw challenges at me, people would leave, storms would come, but I now knew that I could endure, I could rise, and I could rebuild myself, piece by piece, day by day. I passed by a cafe and decided to sit for a while, sipping a warm cup of tea. As I watched people around me, laughing, talking, living, I felt a deep sense of connection to the world. I was not invisible. I was not powerless. I was here, alive, and moving forward. The feeling was liberating. I realized that healing is not a single moment, but a continuous process. Some days would be hard, some nights would be lonely, but each day I chose to embrace life, to care for myself, and to see the beauty around me. I reclaimed a part of my soul that had been lost. I wrote in my journal that day, I am not defined by those who leave me. I am defined by my courage, my choices, and my willingness to love and live fully. I am enough. I am strong. I am free. And as I closed the journal, I felt a calm settle over me, a quiet strength that I knew would remain even in difficult times. I had survived storms, both literal and emotional, and now I had the power to face life with open eyes and a fearless heart. For the first time in months, I smiled, not a fleeting smile, but one that came from the depths of my being. I was no longer just surviving, I was living, and that made all the difference.